Greetings. This is Management 431, and we are now getting into the last chapter of the semester, and the chapter is number 13, Staffing System Evaluation and Technology. And the goal here in this chapter is for us to do an overview of appropriate metrics and how we evaluate our system once we have implemented and hired the people that we wanted to hire. Remember, in the very beginning, we talked about process goals and outcome goals, and that's what we're going to be evaluating now, making sure that we've met our process and outcome goals. We're also going to talk about how we can use technology to help us with the staffing process, human resource information systems, and the role that human resource information systems play in helping us to manage our staffing needs. We're now going to be looking at the learning objectives for this chapter, as always. The first thing that we want to be able to do is identify, be able to describe the effects that staffing activities have on applicants, candidates, new hires, and the organization. So we want to know, we developed the system, what impact did it have on the applicant? What kind of outcomes can we expect to see in the person who's now going to be, who's in our staffing process? What outcome did it have, and what impact did it have on our new hires, and what impact did all of our activities have on the bottom line of the company? We're also going to be looking at the different kinds of staffing metrics and how and when we use each one. We're going to look at describing what we mean by the balanced staffing scorecard and sort of what are the different factors that we need to balance and juggle to be able to identify good staffing outcomes. We're going to look at how digital staffing dashboards help managers to monitor and improve staffing, and we're going to describe how staffing technology improves the efficiency and effectiveness of the staffing function. We've spent time across the lectures in this class addressing the different kinds of staffing outcomes. We've got applicant outcomes, first of all. We're looking at whether or not they self-select into the process or self-select out of the process. What were the things that encouraged them to stay in? What were the things that encouraged them to leave? What kind of job expectations did they have? Did they believe that the system and their interactions were fair? What was their image of the employer? Did it align with the image that we were trying to project? And were they willing and able to make a job offer acceptance if we offered them the job? Obviously, not all of our applicants got job offers, but those that did get the offers, were they willing to accept the job offer, and under what conditions? In terms of new hires, we want to look at new hire success. We want to also look at new hire promotability. As we brought people in, were they able to be promoted appropriately? We wanted to look at retention. Were we able to retain people after a month, or 2 months, or 3 months, or 6 months, or a year? How long do applicants typically stay in our company? What's the average turnover rate for different positions? We want to look at their commitment to the organization and to their job. We also want to look at their motivation and engagement, and what are their perceptions of the employer image now, particularly as compared to when they were an applicant, and so we can compare and contrast that. Lastly, we want to look at organizational outcomes. Are we able to execute our strategy with the people that we have in our organization? So do we have the right people in the right place doing the right work, enabling us to meet our strategic goals? How is the organization's performance? How are our sales? How is our profitability? How is our market share? We want to look at what impact these things have had on the stakeholder gains and losses. Have our stockholders, has their stock value gone up? Has it gone down? Has it flatlined? What do we know about our relationship with other stakeholders, like our customers and suppliers? What is our reputation with them? What is our image as an employer in the big picture in the industry? Do people look to us as a good employer and that we want to go work for? And again, we can look to companies like Southwest Airlines or Google. They have reputations for being great employers, even if you may not like their products or maybe don't fly their airlines. They are still very competitive in terms of their ability to attract high quality talent because they have a great employer image. What kind of spillover effects have we noticed from our hiring process? Did we do a good job? Were we able to build good relationships with people? Did we find that because we treated a couple of candidates poorly, because we had to do a layover, layoff rather, that we had negative spillover effects on our company? How long does it take us to fill vacancies? Is it taking us longer than normal, shorter than normal? Sort of where are our trends in terms of time to fill? Are they tracking to economic conditions, or are there some other factors that we need to be aware of? What's our return on investment, for our staffing system? And you guys will be calculating your ROI in your staffing system. But we want to know, did we have a positive impact on the bottom line of the company? Did we get a return, a good positive return on our investment? And then lastly, our leadership pipeline. Do we have good people ready to be promoted? Do we have a good succession plan in place? And are we filling the needs in our succession plan appropriately with the people that we've attracted and recruited? These are common outcomes that we should consider every single time we do hiring for our company. Some of these will be more or less important to each company, different depending on their strategy, depending on their directions, but broadly speaking, these are the range of staffing outcomes that you want to be assessing. As we're thinking about the financial impact of our staffing system, we have to be able to differentiate between direct and indirect costs. And these are things that we would include in our ROI, but we need to be able to differentiate between the two. Direct costs are things that are incurred as an immediate direct result of staffing. For example, higher training costs, lower productivity, etc. Those are direct costs. And then indirect costs are things like lost business opportunities or lower morale or things of that nature. So differentiating between direct and indirect is important when you are making a case for training. People need to see what the indirect cost is for not doing a good training program, or the indirect cost for not hiring good people, or only hiring the bare minimum that you need. So people need to see not just the direct impact, but also the indirect impact. So staffing system evaluation involves doing an analysis of your process and the system that you've put in place to hire people to determine whether or not it's performed as you expected it to perform and that it was effective. Again, a system can do what it's designed to do, which is to hire candidates, right? But it may not be effective in that you may not be hiring the best candidates. You might be satisficing and hiring the minimally acceptable candidate, which can cost you more money than it gives you a benefit. So evaluating the system enables us to really objectively assess whether or not we can have an impact on the business strategy of the company. If we are not hiring people that can help us achieve that outcome, then there's no point for us to be doing hiring. It's actually going to cost us more than it should to be able to do this. So once we understand whether or not it was effective and it helped us meet our goals, then we have to go back and see where are there opportunities for improvement. Where are there things that what are things that we can do to make changes so that our staffing system can achieve what we wanted to achieve and help the organization meet its strategic goals. We've talked about this from the beginning, how we can gain a competitive advantage by having a good staffing system in place. And we were able to then bring in the right kind of human capital, the right kind of intellectual property that we need for organizational success. And so if we don't pay attention to our staffing system evaluation, we're never going to be certain that the things that we put in place here have had a positive or negative impact on our organization's competitive advantage. Even though we might measure things at a specific point in time, our goal should be to track things, to look at trends, and not just look at things in a cross-sectional perspective. We should be looking at trends over time. We should be looking at our return on investment over time, and we should be making comparisons of our key metrics over time. KPIs are the new buzzword. They're key performance indicators. They are the measurable factors critical to the organization's long-term and short-term success and helping them to achieve the goals. So what we should be looking at are the outcomes that tell us that the staffing system was successful. All right, so that's the variables against which we're assessing our staffing system. Um, to design effective KPIs, you have to understand what's important to the business and what key business measures exist. So these things are related to each other. The KPIs that promote and lead to organizational success are those best able to enhance strategy execution and organizational performance. Things like revenue growth, customer satisfaction, innovation, globalization. So how does HR and staffing play a role in this? Well, are we bringing in innovators who are helping and contributing to revenue growth? So we hire a new employee and suddenly our revenue growth goes through the roof. This individual has brought in twice as much work as we expected, right? So we can directly see that revenue growth is going to come from bringing in a new, successful, highly talented employee. Customer satisfaction. So we hire new employees, we train them in good customer service. We should see a growth in customer satisfaction and what that impact is. New innovations that are brought into the company. Did the new employees bring in new innovations for us to assess and market? So all of these factors, staffing supports the key performance indicators for the company. So will HR determine those key performance indicators? They may work hand in hand with the top management team, but oftentimes the top management team determines those KPIs, and it's HR's job to make sure they're in alignment with those KPIs when they are assessing their metrics. Leading and lagging indicators are a terminology that you very likely learned in economics, macroeconomic classes, etc. So lagging indicators is information that is available only after staffing decisions have been made, which means they tell us sort of after the fact. And leading indicators are things that precede or predict staffing outcomes. Some indicators, of course, are both, but basically, availability of talent is definitely thought of as a leading indicator of quality, but it also can be a lagging indicator of a company's employer image. So if there is, we don't have really good talent available to us, and maybe that's because our image is bad. So depending on where we think about it, a leading factor or a lagging factor, these are things that we would need to consider. Leading indicators are things that we might want to consider as may impact the staffing system down the line, and then sort of the outcomes of the staffing system are related more to our lagging indicators. So table 13.1 gives you a great example of some leading and lagging indicators. For example, leading indicators are things like employee image. Employee image will bring someone to the firm. So if we have a really good employer image, this should result in better application rates, better applicant quality, better new hire quality, and better staffing return on our investment. Applicant quality is also considered a leading indicator. So if we have really good, high quality applicants, that means that we will probably be able to fill our position much more quickly, that we are less likely to see turnover, we're more likely to see good new hire quality, greater satisfaction, better leadership skills, good staffing ROI. Applicant quantity, also is getting at the number of applicants we have. Now remember, this is not always a great thing. We don't always want to have a huge number of applicants. Clearly we want enough to be able to make a differentiated decision based on high versus low quality, but if we're doing a really good job with realistic job previews, we may have fewer applicants than one would normally have depending on the position that you're hiring for, so that we don't always want to worry about having a massive amount of applicants, but we certainly want enough to be able to find really good applicants and a really good candidate in that pool. Remember again too that you want to go after your passive job seekers. So you want to make sure you use multiple sources to get at active as well as passive job seekers, and keep that in mind. Lagging indicators are employer image. What we will probably see is some poor hiring decisions, poor staffing process, poor recruiting if we have a negative employer image. Turnover rate is a lagging indicator. If we have high levels of turnover, that means we've probably made some lousy decisions in hiring, or we've had poor sources, or we just didn't do a good job recruiting and attracting the right people. Job success, again, if we have lousy job success, that means there's poor planning, poor sourcing, poor recruiting, poor selection across the board. So getting to understand leading and lagging indicators will help us with determining the key performance indicators and making the case for how we are or not addressing our metrics and our KPIs. Along with KPIs and leading and lagging indicators, we want to look at short-term and long-term metrics. Short-term metrics help us to evaluate success in a very short time frame, particularly with new recruits, new hires, etc. So we look at the quality of new hires, the number of diverse hires coming from each source, the percentage of hires for each job family coming from certain sources. So we want to, across our organization, know different job families, different sources for each job family, so it's a large matrix that you'll be creating. You want to know the average time to start, how quickly you can get people starting, and how quickly they can be up and productive, so the time to contribution, etc. Long-term metrics help us evaluate the long-term effect of our staffing system, and we should always be assessing our system on a regular basis to make some changes to it. So just because it works this year and even next month doesn't mean 6 months from now it's still going to work for us. So we want to look at job success overall by recruiting source and recruiter. We're looking at the tenure of the employee, how long do they stay with the company. Obviously break this down by source and by recruiter, and the promotion rates, whether or not these people are really good at their job and that they're willing and they are growing with the company as we had anticipated. So all of these are important for helping us to determine the effectiveness of our system.